Hi, I'm Neil Nobel, editor-at-large of The Prickly Pear, and welcome to the Cactus Patch. Our guest this morning is Steve Zipperman. Steve is running for the Arizona State Senate, Legislative District number 1 in Prescott. Welcome, Steve, to the Cactus Patch.
Hi, Neil. Glad to be here.
Steve, I understand you're a refugee from California. So why did you pick Arizona and why did you pick the Prescott area?
Well, I was married for 30 years. My wife passed away and I got remarried. And I took my new wife up to Sedona and she she and I was she and I have a lot of the same experiences. And she had owned property in Prescott Valley. On the way home from Sedona, we talked to one another and we decided that this is an area we'd both considered living in for many years. And so we came through Prescott and we love it here. And so we decided to settle down. She and I, this is our home. We love Yavapai County and the people, the values. There are a lot of things, the history. And as a result, we decided that we're going to spend the rest of our lives here. And I'm totally committed to Arizona. I'm totally committed to the Prescott area. And that pretty much sums it up. We love it here, and we've made our home here. We're not going to leave.
Tell me about your early life. I understand you're a veteran and you're a lawyer. Is that correct?
Yes, I spent 3.5 years in the Army during the Vietnam War years. I enlisted at 17 for 3 years, and then I extended for an additional 6 months uh, to get some extra training. And the military was very good to me. I learned an awful lot about survival, about accomplishing the mission. And once I got into civilian life, I used that to set goals for myself. And I accomplished those missions one after another to advance my career and my ability to help and serve people. I owned a Century 21 real estate office, had about 50 agents working for me, and learned a lot about the law in that capacity, wrote a lot of documents, and as a result, I negotiated the words in those documents and got to learn a little about the legal terminology. But then I decided to go to law school. I sold the office and went to law school, and
How old were
I
you when
worked
you
my
went?
way through.
How old were you when?
I was about, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll go ahead.
I was about 34 when I decided to go to law school, so I was pretty old, but I made it through law school. I worked my way through in the hardcore gang unit of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, putting very bad men in prison. And I got some very good courtroom experience there. And then I went out, worked for an 88 lawyer, large firm. I did medical malpractice defense, defending doctors and hospitals against malpractice cases. And then I went out on my own after 2 or 3 years and practiced law for 28 years, did very well. I was always focused on serving my clients. I was not focused on the money, and my clients appreciated that. I never had to advertise either in the real estate business or in the legal business. I got a lot of word of mouth referrals because people were happy with the way I served them. And this is just, I'm failing retirement at this point. Can't just sit back with the remote control in my hand. I have to be active. I have to be setting goals for myself. And right now I'm running for the Arizona State Senate for Legislative District 1.
Well, that sort of leads into my next question. That is, obviously, you've had a successful life, you live in a beautiful area, and you could retire. Why are you getting into politics?
Well, as a veteran, I'm vested in this country. I've sweated and bled for this country. I would have died for the country at the age of 17. And if I did, that would have been like 65 years of my life that I was giving up. But today it's only 10 or 15 years. It's a lot easier choice. I'm watching our country be destroyed from inside. I took that oath, and the oath that we take when we go in the military is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We've always known who our foreign enemies were, but we didn't realize that we had so many domestic enemies that
Yeah.
we elected and put in our government. And they're destroying our government. They're taking away our rights. My wife and I have been teaching the U.S. Constitution for the last 5 years. We start with the DVD set from Hillsdale College, and then we've added a lot of supplemental materials to it. And it's 24 hours of instruction on the United States Constitution. And the students that take our course, they get a lot out of it. We feel like we're spreading the gospel according to the founding fathers. And it's an opportunity now to put a lot of that to practice and to implement a lot of what the founding fathers had in mind when they set this wonderful country up.
Oh, God bless you for doing that. Because we are limited in time. You are running for office. What are let's say the three biggest issues for you that have motivated you to run for the Arizona Senate?
Well, I ran 2 years ago, and when I did, my name was an unknown. Nobody knew what a Zipperman was. So it took some effort. I was running against Ken Bennett, who is a household name. He's a professional politician. I'm not. And he does a lot of things I don't agree with. I just couldn't sit back and let him continue to destroy our great state and our great country. There are a lot of things. I lost the election by 256 votes,
Wow.
and there were 56,000 ballots cast in that election. So it was very close. And I really do want to serve the people of Yavapai County. And this is an opportunity for me to use my experience and my knowledge as a lawyer. I know the words, I know what they mean, I've used them. I know the way judges and lawyers use the law in practice every day. And I've negotiated tens of thousands of written agreements between parties, frequently with a nasty lawyer on the other side of the negotiation. So writing bills and negotiating the wording in bills, which is what our state Senate does, that's something I have a very large, well-developed skill set to be able to do. And election integrity is very important to me. I want to be able to make a difference. There's several of our election laws. When I lost the election, I went and I looked at the Arizona revised statutes. I went through them very carefully, and it became apparent to me that no one can successfully challenge an election result once it's been announced. That's why President Trump lost. That's why Kari Lake lost. That's why Abe Hamadeh lost. That's why Mark Finchem lost. I'm not saying there wasn't fraud in the election. I believe there was fraud in our election. But I think that there are a lot of changes that could be made to make our election process be consistent with the will of the voters. I think people are frustrated. I hear it all the time that their vote isn't translated into the right candidate being elected. And my experience just with that one election was such that I realized that if you can't contest it, even though there's a huge section that says election contests, this is what you have to do to win. But you can't, because the criteria require you to do something that is impossible to prove. And that's the emphasis I want to put on it. It isn't necessarily bad judges like the one in New York that totally destroyed the Constitution in trying President Trump. Instead, it has to do with the fact you have to prove that if the errors that you're complaining about never happened, that you would have received enough votes to win the election. And once the ballot is separated from the envelope, you can't tell how anyone would have voted. And so you can't subtract out votes that were done wrongfully. And it makes it a real problem. So that's one change I'd like to implement. There's a couple others. An intentional violation of election law, that should be really severely punished. And I think 20 years in prison for every intentional violation of an Arizona election law is a really good start. Um, I want it to be something that will act as a deterrent to people who are thinking about maybe ballot harvesting. You know, the lady that was down near the border that engaged in ballot harvesting, she got 30 days in jail, a slap on the wrist. If you had to face 100 years in jail because you harvested 5 ballots, I think people would think twice before they engaged in wrongful conduct. That's one of the things I do. The other thing is that judges do not have discretion. There's no statute and no constitutional provision here in Arizona that gives a judge the discretion to say, you know, there was a substantial violation here of Arizona election laws. I am going to order a new election. And like in Carrie Lake's case, she lost by 17,200 votes, but she showed proof that there were 60,000 improperly verified signatures under the law. And so those improperly verified signatures are a substantial proof that the election wasn't free and fair like they're supposed to be. And a judge needs discretion to say, you know what, that's enough evidence for me to order a new election. Instead, she couldn't find 17,201 voters out of those 60,000. She couldn't tell how they voted. So she couldn't prove that she was entitled under the current laws to a new election. So, yes, there was fraud, but you have to tie it to you losing the election with something that you cannot prove. And by reading the statutes, I went to a couple of lawyers down in Phoenix and I talked to them about it and said, this is what I'm reading and this is what I think. What do you think? Yeah, you have to prove that. And if you don't, you can't win. So I feel that those are a couple of the changes I'd like to make right off the bat, if I
Well,
can.
election integrity. So I think we're totally with you on that. I think here in Arizona, the border is a big issue.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. One of the things that I've done, I've testified many times in front of several of the committees down in the House and the Senate down in Phoenix. And I've gotten to know a lot of the senators and a lot of the people in the House as a result of that. And I think that there is a solution to the border problem. Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution says that if a state is invaded, that the federal government has a duty to defend them against that invasion. It's black and white, it's very clearly set forth. I've asked hundreds of people at different presentations, do you believe that we're being invaded? Every hand goes up. So I don't think that's a problem either. What I did is I found a lawyer. I'm just a private citizen. I'm not in the legislature. I don't work in the government. But I got a lawyer who is a constitutional lawyer who will take the case, write up a complaint, and file State of Arizona versus United States of America for violation of Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. It's a black and white case. It's simple. I also have found somebody who's a benefactor, somebody with a lot of money, who will pay that lawyer for his legal fees. So it will cost the state of Arizona nothing. The problem is the state of Arizona is entitled to this defense, not me personally. So the lawsuit has to be brought by the state. Katie Hobbs will never bring a lawsuit like that because she's aligned with Biden. She's a Democrat. And so what you have to do then is go to the legislature. So I approached the president of the Senate, Warren Peterson, who knows me. We're cordial. We have a good relationship. We text each other back and forth once in a while. And I said to him, I have a lawyer. It won't cost anybody in the state any money. And he's ready to file this lawsuit on your behalf if you want to. Well, he wasn't real interested. He has other fish to fry and other ways of approaching this problem. I think they were counting on the bill that got vetoed by Katie Hobbs to establish a strong border. So that matter will be in an initiative that's going to be on the ballot. The House and Senate passed a concurrent resolution that would allow the people to vote on whether or not that border bill, basically the same terms, whether or not that should become part of our law. The problem, of course, with that is it has to get voted on. I think the people will vote on it, but it doesn't need the governor's signature. But, you know, a lot of people have trouble. I also went to the head of the Freedom Caucus, which is the most conservative people in the legislature. His name is Jake Hoffman. I've talked with him about this bill, about bringing the lawsuit, and he was aligned with Warren Peterson. Well, we're going to hold off a while. We're trying to wait and see if this gets voted on by the people. Okay, fine. But meanwhile, I've got an attorney ready to file the lawsuit. It's a strong basis. And I think we should do that because that will fix the border problem, at least to the best of our ability. Um, you could seek an injunction in that lawsuit that prohibits the federal government from not taking action as they're required under the Constitution. They're violating the Constitution, and that's not right. So we need, in order to enforce it, we need to file a lawsuit. That's the only way you're going to get the law enforced.
Very interesting.
There are a lot of other ways to solve the problem. I like Trump's border wall. I think it was being used very effectively. There were areas that were not covered by the wall yet, and so those areas needed to be patched up or wall erected there. Um, right now, there's no will by the federal government to build that wall or to continue the construction of the wall or to enforce the border at all. But we could put a wall on the Arizona side of the border, maybe 10 or 15 feet on the Arizona side, right next to the Trump wall. And that would work. And a lot of people go, oh my God, that's great, but who's going to pay for it? We don't want to pay for another wall. Well, I've come up with a suggestion for doing that. I'm a little creative on this stuff. Crowdfunding. I think if you ask the American people to pay for that wall, they would be happy to donate enough money to build a wall on the Arizona side. Now, when I ran 2 years ago, one of my opponents said, you can't do that because there's a Native American reservation on the border, and it's the Tohono O'odham. And yes, there is indeed a reservation on the border. But what I would do is I'd go to the tribal chiefs and I'd give them a choice. Okay, we want to build the wall right along the border, 15 feet on our side, on the U.S. side of that border. So you can allow us to do that, and we need about 50 feet to be able to get in there to maintain the wall. Or if you don't want us to do that, we respect your sovereignty. We'll put it on the Arizona side of your reservation, and we'll put you on the other side of the fence with Mexico, with the cartels, with the drug problems. If you want to be on that side, fine. If you want to put it right along the border, the entire length of the border of Arizona to Mexico, we'd be happy to do that. But I think there are solutions, there are creative solutions that can solve the problem.
Very interesting. Uh, your third and final passion right now?
Well, school choice is very important to me. We currently have a system in place. They used to call it a voucher system. Here, the laws have referred to it as the Empowerment Scholarship Accounts. They refer to that as ESA. And I'm very much in favor of that program. I think our money is well spent there. And the reason is a typical student, K through 12, throughout Arizona, um, the school gets paid $14,000 approximately per student, and that's what they provide the education with. Unfortunately, 56% of the Arizona budget is going to education today. Yet, students K through 12 throughout Arizona their proficiency in mathematics is 21%. Their proficiency in English is 44%. How can these kids compete in the real world for good jobs or compete for good scholarships if they want to go to a university? Answer, they can't. They're being handicapped by our education system. So competition raises everybody's performance. And as far as I'm concerned, we need to have competition with the public schools, by the private sector, by parents homeschooling. Parents can get $7,000 to $8,000 per child if they're not special needs children, and they can get even more for those kids. And that money, the parents can use it to provide an education either through homeschooling, through private school, or parochial school. They get their choice. The money follows the child. So if the parent doesn't feel that Arizona schools are doing an adequate job of teaching their children the basics as school's supposed to, then the parent can move their child out at the parent's discretion. They move them out of those public schools that are not doing well, and they can homeschool the kids. And from what I've seen, the kids are getting a better education. They have a better chance of competing in the world, and it solves a lot of problems that we have. Right now, the Empowerment Scholarship Program is under attack by the governor.
Yep.
It's the first thing that she wants to cut money from, and it's the first thing that our current senator and the governor, they both want to restrict the parents' access by putting more limitations on those children and the parents getting the money. So I'm all in favor of the empowerment scholarship accounts, and I will support them once I'm elected. And I think the idea is it's a better idea to expand them and make the public schools compete for butts in chairs. I think that that will make them more competitive, make our kids more able to compete in the real world. And finally, there's one piece that I haven't discussed. I think after 2 years of high school, a child should have a choice. They have to make a choice. Am I going in a university or college direction for a further education that way? Or do I want to go to a trade school? In which case, the last 2 years of college could be used to teach them how to become a plumber, how to become an auto mechanic, how to become an electrician. Working as an apprentice, a lot of hours, the hours they would put into high school, as an apprentice, learning how to do the trades. And there are a lot of people who are good with their hands, but the education system, unfortunately, it doesn't deal with them appropriately. And because of that, they don't have an opportunity to get that training. They come out of college because everybody's forced into college. That's where you have to go. And they come out of school with a couple 100,000, 200, 300,000 in debt, and they can't get a job. And instead, I think that the trades need people. They need trained people who can do the jobs. And it's a perfect way to get them trained and to make them productive citizens, give them an opportunity at life. I'm all about opportunities for people. And I think that if we handled our education system a little bit more intelligently, I think the kids would have a much better shot at a good future.
You know, Steve, I'm personally a little conflicted about this. I'm a big supporter of school choice and have been for a number of years. But I also kind of feel that, you know, we pay for the public schools and yet we abandon the public schools to this kind of monopoly of the teachers union, the teachers colleges, the administrators, and they grind out this horrible education for kids. And if their parents aren't terribly alert, they're likely to just remain in the public schools. Is there anything we can do additionally through funding or lack of funding, supervision, some changes to make the public schools better than they are?
How about performance-based payments? Their pay is directly tied to their results, just like in the private sector. If you
Yeah.
don't do a good job in the private sector, you're gone. I think that those things can be fixed, but you have to have a legislature with the will and or a governor that will help. I'm not convinced that we necessarily have that. I think the ESA is really good because it forces the public schools to compete or die. And if they die, so be it. But what I think will happen is that a lot of the teachers who teach in public schools will be picked up and hired in the private sector because you have to educate all those kids somehow. And though in the private sector, that performance-based pay really works. So the teachers won't be unemployed as a result of this. The administrators might be, and I think that's a good thing. I think public school administrators are where a lot of that money goes. It doesn't filter down to the teachers. And we could restructure things through this ESA program, advertise it, let people know. Word of mouth is pretty strong. The real key is getting parents to talk to each other. They can do so in church, they can do so in the public square. Talk to each other and, hey, Mike, we're private homeschooling my child, and she's doing really well. And maybe your kid should consider maybe you should consider moving your child to the private sector as well. There are some really good schools. I know in the Prescott area, there's Trinity Christian. They do a phenomenal job of educating their children. And we happened to go to a program a few months ago. It was very enlightening. They had some of their kids speaking to the crowd, and they were extremely intelligent. They were way ahead of public school kids at the same age, and they were doing very well. So, I think that there are alternatives. Government is never the alternative. It should never be the alternative. Yes, everybody had to get an education, and that's why the public schools were created. And I think that was appropriate at the time. Look, I'm a product of the public schools.
Oh my.
I went through public kindergarten through university work. I have a master's in business from a public school. I understand the public schools. They used to be a lot better than they are today. Today, they're a forum for propagandizing our children, for brainwashing them into leftist ideologies that I don't agree with, and that should be stopped. But the administrators in that system, they like it. They're promoting it. They're in favor of it. So, from my perspective, I think that we need to put more pressure on the public schools to do a better job. They're not doing a good enough job, in my opinion, right now, and they're being paid handsomely. In spite of the Red for Ed and the teachers' unions all saying, oh, we need more money, there is no correlation between the amount of money that we pay in taxes to those schools and the quality of education that our kids receive.
Well, if there is,
And
it's an inverse correlation because it seems like the more we pay, the worse the results are.
You're right. And you asked a really intelligent question about whether or not, how do we feel about paying for the public schools and then paying for the private education or schools for our kids. Well, I look at it this way. We've been paying for the public schools for a long time. Even when people wanted to send their kids to parochial schools, they had to pay their taxes that went to support the public schools. And the way I used to look at it that was pretty enlightened, I think, is that kept kids from breaking into my house and stealing my car or stealing my possessions or holding a gun to me. It stopped that behavior because they were educated properly and they could go get a job. Well, today that isn't the case. And so because of that, you're not really getting a fair shake with the money that's going to public schools. So I think that when you pull your kid out of school through the ESA program, that some of that funding is being lost. The problem that I have is the same one you do. Why does half of the money, $14,000 a year, goes to the public schools? The ESA program will give you $7,000. So that's half of the money. Why does the public school get half of the money if they're not doing an adequate job of educating our kids? So I think that if a parent removes their kid from public school, they should get all of the money. And so the same argument that you're making, I'm making, but a little bit of a different twist based on the public schools are being compensated for doing such a horrible job that the parents are removing their children. That doesn't make any sense to me either.
Let's just talk about politics in our closing moments. I think the primary vote is on July 30th. Is that correct?
That's correct. And early voting starts on July 3rd.
So early voting starts on July 3rd. So for our listeners, you need to go to vote@zipperman.com. That's spelled zipper like a zipper, zipperman.com. And you can learn more about Steve and what he's doing and why he's running for office. And Steve, we thank you. We want to be respectful of your time. Any final thoughts?
The website is actually votezipperman.com. Our website is vote@zipperman.com. And I'm going to do something that's a little strange for this type of an interview. My phone number is 928-263-8575. And if you have questions about my positions on the issue, any issue, you can go to the website at votezipperman.com and you can get more information there, or you can call me. I'll be happy to talk to you about my positions. And keep that number handy because I want to be available to anybody that I represent. So if you're in Yavapai County in Legislative District 1, call me after I'm elected. I want to hear from you because our founding fathers believed that we were supposed to have a representative government and that we should be able to communicate with our elected officials. Unfortunately, our elected officials don't return our phone calls, they don't return our emails. I'm committed to doing that even after I'm elected. I know it's an insane job and it's an insane task, but how else am I going to know how to vote on issues? How else am I going to know what's important to the people that I represent? I want to stay in touch with my constituents. I like what Eli Crane has done. He takes surveys of his constituents and then he votes accordingly. And I intend to do the same thing. I'm learning as I go. I've watched him do that several times. When Speaker McCarthy wanted his vote to remain Speaker of the House, Eli said, no, I can't do that because my constituents don't want me to. And that's the way I will behave too. I will fight for what the people want and what's in their best interest.
Steve, that's a very unusual and gracious position, and you're an unusual and very gracious man. And I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Neil. It's been a pleasure.